Does your mind automatically switch off the minute you hear the words student mental health? Does a voice somewhere just go like, oh God, let's be prepared for a lecture now on junk food, social media addiction, entitlement, the problems with the young generation, and the bad education system? Somewhere in between all of this, there'll be a couple of studies thrown in. 1 out of 3 children are depressed. 2 out of 4 children are stress eating junk food every night. 6 out of 8 kids are not able to sleep. And that's it. Somehow you're supposed to find the answers in all of this. We do talk a lot about student mental health today, which is good. You see it on TV, you see it in offline panel discussions, you see it in magazines. But are we really understanding what a young person is going through? Because if we truly did, then the fact that today, with the cancellations and the uncertainties surrounding various entrance examinations, is impacting millions of students and giving them so much of chronic stress and anxiety. And the very fact that this is happening and that no one, be it the state or the school or the coaching centers or even the parents, are thinking to support their journey with adequate mental health support, it speaks a lot about how much we really understand about what young people need today. I was reporting on the entrance exam mess, and I came across a young girl, and she was telling me a story about how she has now developed chronic insomnia. She can't sleep at night. And it's not because of the cancellations alone. It's just the fact that she's so tired of reading books. Books give her extreme amount of stress, and she's worried she'll have to wake up again and read, and she doesn't know if she'll be able to. And I said, did you confide in your parents? I mean, what guidance have they given you? And she said the minute they hear I can't sleep, they think it's because of the phone. And so they went out and bought me more books because they think that the answer to chronic insomnia is a substitute for the phone. This is Sonali Acharji, and you are listening to Health Wealth, a podcast that wants to help you find that ever-elusive balance between overdoing it and taking it very easy when it comes to your well-being. Today, I'm fascinated by the concept of exoplanets and dark matter and black holes. I find it incredibly exciting, and I actively want to read more about it. But when I was in school, I hated physics. In fact, I hated almost all my subjects. And last month, I was talking to a friend from school, and looking back, we just suddenly thought, both of us were depressed. We were very, very unhappy, and that did impact our learning outcomes. And hearing that, you might think that, if they had a bad experience in school, something would have been wrong with the teacher, or something would have been wrong with the school structure, or the books were too difficult. But actually, I went to one of the best schools in Delhi. Our school 20 years back had a school counselor, which was quite rare. It was all about personalized education. It was all bottom-up learning techniques. They were very pro on feedback and discussion and debate. And yet 2 out of 20 students in the classroom were depressed. And they couldn't learn as well as they should have been able to. And that really brings me to what I believe is the problem, that when you reduce a child to just being a student, you're taking away all these other factors that also influence their well-being. Saying something like, let's fix the education system and children will automatically be happier and healthier is a bit like saying, we'll buy the best yeast in the market and the bread will rise. A lot of other things also determine how well your bread is going to rise. The oven, the weather, the mental health of the baker as well. So it's a very simplistic approach to just say something like all the problems lie within the schooling system. Today, we're going to explore the idea of a young person's mental health through the prism of multiple other things that happen. How does family, the food they eat, the amount of sleep they get, the friends they choose to surround themselves with, the hormones that may or may not be in sync, the media they watch, the aspirations they have, how does all this also play a role in what they're feeling and the challenges that they have to go through in life? And I believe that these challenges do change with age. So to make things a little bit more specific and less generic, we're going to discuss it age-wise and hopefully get a more specific and pinpointed picture. Guide us. We have with us today in the studio Dr. Upasna Chatta. She is a psychologist based in Delhi, and she's also the director of Mindscape Center for Counseling and Psychological Wellbeing. She's been working in this field for the last 14 years, and before she was a therapist, she was also an assistant professor. So she also has an idea of what's going on in the education system. Hi.
Thank you so much, Sonali, for having me here.
So you've been a therapist for a while now, a decade plus, and I know post the pandemic, there's been a lot more talk about mental health, particularly those of young people. Have you seen a corresponding impact in the number of people coming to you for therapy?
For sure, there has been. So while there are more number of people coming in for therapy, the reasons why they are coming, the different reasons why they're coming in for therapy is also increased. You know, earlier people would only come up for, let's say, something that's severely impacting them for a longer period of time. Now, people are also walking in when they start noticing and witnessing something and they don't want to prolong it, that it starts impacting their mental health to a level which is not great. I think post-pandemic, conversations around mental health has brought in a little bit more of awareness. And that's why people are able to reach earlier than later.
Which is a very good thing, actually.
Absolutely, it is.
And if we were to narrow it down to young people, would you as a therapist say that in urban India, are young people happy today, generally speaking?
So if I talk about what is happiness then, happiness is again, can be divided into three different aspects, and especially if you're talking about young people. And these young people could be, let's say, children between the ages of 5 or 3 to, let's say, 18. And a little higher also. See, happiness, if we try to divide it, we see that happiness could be 3 levels. One is momentary happiness, which you get from things that you see, a good movie you've watched, you've had a good music to listen to, you ate something nice. All of that is momentary happiness that you give. Younger people, children, the age bracket of 3 to 5, preschoolers and these young kids, they have a lot of momentary happiness because that's how their brains are also developed. The next level of happiness, which is a little bit a more deeper level of happiness, comes through our relationships with people, our friendships, our relationships with our teachers. When did my teacher say a good job? My teachers like me or not? My relationship with my parents, folks, friends. The third level, which we keep growing up in life and we start realizing that that's something that we call as sustainable happiness. That comes through learning new things and learning not in form of education only. Anything is education, right? Like if I'm watching something on Instagram today, whatever I'm watching is educating me, right? Even if it could be educating about comic humor, right? So that's sustainable happiness. Now, if we talk about are the kids happy, I'd still like to quote a research, right? That this is pre-COVID, March 2020.
Right.
NCRT had come up with, their survey of happiness. And they had reported, which was shocking, that only 20% students reported being happy. So this is pre-COVID, right? We're not talking about post-COVID. And that's when, how there were other things that the government took in place and brought in some happiness curriculum. But if I quote that research back then, that was the amount. I don't know what things are today. There are different, again, research. We'll not get into that. But are they happy momentarily? Yes. But if I talk about young people today, I feel they are too pressured to experience any other form of happiness. So again, subjective happiness, experience, momentarily happiness, yes. But I feel the kids are too pressured, the young people are too pressured to not enjoy things on their own.
So I have a 99-year-old grandfather in the family.
Wow.
He's my grandfather-in-law. And I once asked him, I said, what's life?
Yeah.
And he said, life is never about happiness alone. You no matter what you do, you can't prevent sadness.
Yeah, absolutely.
What you can do is learn how to get beyond sadness when it happens, how quickly you can bounce back up.
Yeah.
And that's the bit where, I often feel when, I talk to young people or to, even my nieces and nephews, that ability to bounce back up is somewhere missing, or even the fire to bounce up.
Yes, yes.
There has to be some drive in you that, somebody's there to help us, or somebody's there to, do it for us, or we don't even know how to do it. And so that's why I thought that in this episode, let's go age-wise.
Absolutely.
So we can be a little bit more specific on what kids of a certain age and what parents of kids of certain ages can do.
Yeah.
So if we were to look at 5 to 10, what are the common sort of mental health challenges that one would face? And are there certain signs that one can notice? Because this is the age where a parent can influence the direction in which they go a lot more.
Absolutely.
So are there certain things one needs to keep in mind?
Absolutely. See, when we're talking about ages 5 to 10, this primarily is your primary school. This is the time when a lot of new things are happening. You've moved out of your, pre-primary. You're not getting, not unnecessary, but you're not getting a star for everything that you do. Most schools have that just to encourage the kids.
Golden
Whatever
star.
they do. Yeah.
Encourage a scar.
I don't know.
We need to work the other way.
Because, you just scribble, you get a star. You do
I never
whatever,
got a star.
You get a smiley. It's good, right?
Yeah.
That kind of a positive reinforcement is very important, because when it started, none of that was happening. So, even to a preschooler, you would like to be write an A, write a B. So a lot of changes in the education has happened so that we are easier. We are not, with a child at the age between 3 to 5, where there are a lot of developmental milestones have to be accomplished, and there is a higher margin. You can't compete. So I remember, back then, maybe even SKG, senior KG, kindergarten, nursery also, you were fairly competitive. Exams were happening, classwork, homework, all of that was happening. And now, no such competitions, at least we see it in those, that category of students. But yes, when you're in class 1 to 5, education system is still changing. We're not going to talk much about it. But I would say that's the time when you've started to still understand and get that feeling of competitiveness at least. And now there's more responsibility on you. Now more things are coming up. You're becoming more independent. So this, again, those 5-6 years age is also a transitional age wherein more responsibilities coming your way. Another thing that can happen as a transition is that a lot of times people have realized that there's a new person in the family. Or you've started becoming more aware to the transitions in the family structure with, let's say, someone passing away. With a new sibling coming in, and changes in their routine around it, that they've started being in school for longer, the sibling and all of that changing also. And friendships have started becoming more important. So a lot of times, what mental health concerns or issues or signs can come up, because at this point in time, diagnosing a child with a problem could be a little more trickier. But there are different categories of things that can come up. Some, at this age, you can see that other kids having some neurotypical disorders or issues. Things like ADHD, for that matter, that we know, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We see that maybe speech delay abhi tak chal raha hai with the child. So, you want to look into as the child on the spectrum of Asperger's and other such various things. But at this point in time, you also start seeing the aggression in a child. Now, if you're seeing the child is getting aggressive, is a little too aggressive, if we go by diagnosing the child, if there is disappropriate amount of aggression, which is going to happen because now they need more autonomy. If there are more signs, there's more destruction happening, there's more aggression happening, you can't take care of the temper tantrum, you have to look out for it. If you don't look out for it in this bracket, later it becomes a conduct disorder, wherein a teenager has started destroying property. School mein property destroy kar raha hai, somewhere else, and has no remorse. You don't address it even then. It turns out to something else in the adulthood then. So I'm glad that we're talking about it today age-wise, because that's how we see it.
Yeah.
Getting back to the original question, what are some telltale signs? The first thing that you see with a child and you need to be aware of is school refusal. That's the first thing that happens to, and that can be a reaction to various things. I heard the other day a teacher, a parent came up to me and said that, you know what, Upasna, he wasn't yelled at, but he was passing by in the corridor in the school, and the teacher was just in a loud voice said something to someone, don't talk, to the two boys who were probably walking out. And he just got scared with that. And he doesn't want to go to school now. That ma'am mujhe bhi dantingi kabhi. Right? Now that could either be just forgotten. Let's not pay attention today. Parents are being too attentive to the kids. Or similar telltale signs you could watch out for. That is your child emotionally sensitive? This is the time that you can start watching out for a child's temperament. That temperament, along with the environment, which could be good, bad, difficult, whatever, could make your child more vulnerable to a mental health problem. And not all kids. And then what starts to happen is when you start noticing your child's temperament, unfortunately, we start labeling the child. ये तो बड़ा shy है. He's very shy, he'll not speak up. बोलता क्यों नहीं तू सबकी तरह? What is there for you to get, scared of? Be confident. Now that becomes difficult. So I think one thing that you need to look out for, number one, is school refusal. Could happen for different reasons. So be on a checkout for what your child, try and know your child's temperament in general. And in sight of that temperament, what is an okay thing for them to do? So while you're watching out for your child's temperament, school refusal for some reason, you're seeing that whether your child is having some difficulty sleeping, like you mentioned at the beginning also, right? Are there changes in their sleep pattern? Are they not wanting to talk to their friends now anymore? Are they coming back visibly upset? Are they tearing up a little? Are they more cranky at home also? So you've said something and now they're tearing up. Any behavioral change that you're seeing in your child in terms of his sleep, his appetite, his day-to-day functioning and his day-to-day level of happiness and their reactions could be symptoms that you need to watch out for. And that doesn't mean it's a mental health issue or a concern. It could be temporary. The child is going through something. If you as a parent or a teacher are able to offer that child that protective environment of conversation, communication, listening, the child feels okay. You've not let it boil it down to other things. So I think that is one thing that you can look for. And being attentive, I know parents are also very busy these days, right? Because of the demands of the society today. But just this check-in on a daily basis at whatever convenient time is good enough for you to just, look at that all is okay, no? There's something that you need to talk about. I think that is it. So school refusals are the most immediate things that we see in kids primary age because they're not able to very accurately talk about what's going on. Could be because of bullying, teacher scolding, not understanding academic difficulties. That's why they don't want to go. So your school refusal comes across as a symptom that can be delved into understanding ADHD hai, learning difficulty aa rahi hai, ya bullying ho raha hai, ya confidence issue hai, ya social anxiety hai. That's one sign that I'll always ask parents to work on confidently, right? And delve into it. So even if one thing you have to look at, just look at that.
And, I'm so glad you talked about temperament at this age because, I'll give my example. I am a very highly visual person who's also highly empathetic. Now, I believe that I wish I'd had the tools to build a personality that would not give me as many triggers for the temperamental, disposition that I had. So, for example, because I'm so visual, I once saw, just by mistake, a documentary of a flight crashing. And that visual has just stayed in my head. So I have severe aerophobia. And then in the same way, if somebody told me that I have been beaten by so and so, it's not just visualistic, it's also the empathy part of it acts up. I feel that pain. And I have gone through 15, 20 years not knowing how to tailor, my personality to meet with, the way I think or the way, my mind works. And now looking back, I wish at that age, somebody in school or somebody had just, sort of started grooming me to say that, okay, have these boundaries, or if you're not in a good mood, then don't listen to people vent. Certain things to protect myself from overthinking or over-imagining. So I'm very glad you brought that up. Another thing is the tendency of a young child to diminish themselves, particularly as one is aging. So say 10 to 15. If now we're going ahead. If a parent is noticing that a child is also diminishing themselves, going and blurring into the background. Because I've often met parents and my own friends say this, that that turned out to be a symptom of them having self-confidence issues, something which they wouldn't have ever linked that. Are there other things at this age that, can link to slightly larger problems?
At the age of 5 to 10?
10 to 15.
The age between 10 to 15 is again, your starting of your body's changing, hormones coming in. You're going through a lot of growth spurt, 10 to 12 also, right? So it also comes across with, a set of expectation of how I'm supposed to also look like, how I'm also now supposed to fare, because now when you've moved to middle school, you're supposed to be popular or not popular, supposed to have some hobby that you're excelling in. Academics are taking all of this, and your body is supposed to look a certain way. So all of this, starts bringing in a lot of competition, a lot of different fears, there are also now emergence of more and more emotions inside of you. So, this entire idea of embarrassment starts coming up for you. You start now understanding more complex emotions. You were fearful as a child, but it's now that you also start understanding that anxious part of it. That I'm also getting anxious. I can notice what's happening in my body around it because more such instances are coming up. So I think with that complexity and that lack of understanding of what is happening with me inside of my head, inside of my body or outside of my body, and those big emotions, and nobody to tell you about it, I think that makes you go back.
Yeah.
That let me just hide.
Confidence is a big thing at this age.
Because you don't know what to do, right? And nobody talks about it. Nobody tells you about it. So it feels like it's only my experience. Because on the outside, everybody is doing it and everybody knows how to manage it.
Yeah.
So since nobody's talking about it, they feel they're the ones who are the odd ones out. So they might as well not talk about it because it'll again have a problem.
Yeah.
It'll have an implication. They'll be made fun of.
Yeah.
So that's why they back off. And that's one of those signs. And then one of the reasons that will happen. And I think, more and more of, body image issues starts coming up at this point in time. Quite a lot of them. Because your relationships have become complicated because you now also understand the family dynamics more. Maybe even as a younger kid, you were, shielded by what's going on in the family. Now, because you're grown up, even your mother has started to complain about, for example, what's happening in the household. So your beliefs and opinions about relationships have become complicated. The mother speaks about the father being a certain way, about the family being a certain way. So you had a lot of, when you as a child looked at relationships, there were nice relationships, family. Now you see within relationships, things are not as black and white. And that's the part of how family systems are. But then nobody talks about it. So you've thrown a lot of information at the child because now the child is taller, understands things, is watching things, so gets it. But then nobody tells them what to do about it. And that's that complication, that confusion makes them internalize a lot of things. Makes them believe that if all of this is happening, then maybe because of me.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So when your core belief starts shaping in a more negative way, then you start believing in them, and then they start diffusing into the other areas of your life also. So what you believed something, maybe let's happen in school. You come back, you have a experience, you see that as an evidence and you can put it in your kitty. Oh, even my colony friends don't want to be with me. I might not be good enough. Mummy said something to me. Oh, I might not be good enough. That's why she's raising her voice. I might not be good enough. So it starts going everywhere. You see, I'm not a good enough person. Let me, go back. Yeah. So you start noticing at this age some amount of mood disruption, mood going low, lack of interest in any things. And that's where you also start seeing that kids are becoming depressed also at this point in time. Childhood depression also. So that's some coming up. Yeah. But not as visible maybe.
Yeah. So, when a kid or a young person doesn't develop a healthy sense of self, this sort of emptiness inside, you also try to fill it up in certain ways, either with food. Yeah. Sugar is one big thing, you know, or some people do it with boys, some people do it with bullying others. Yeah. In fact, a lot of bullies have turned out to be those who've been bullied themselves.
Absolutely.
Or you fill it up with, video games. That's another thing. So you do have to fill up the emptiness. And that's a very temporary, like you said, a very temporary sense of happiness that
Yeah.
comes, but
Yeah.
you have to address it. Another thing, which people, I mentioned boys or girls, but sex in general. If we're to be honest, I mean, it's not a judgmental thing, but there is overexposure to sexual imagery. There is a certain narrative out there of what the perfect female or male body should look like. A lot of pressure on, everything from, your nails to your eyes to,
Yeah.
I am a millennial, even I'm finding it very difficult to keep track of trends today. So it exists. What impact does this have, especially when there's no knowledge given on what this means or what is a healthy body or any sort of guidance given? What impact does it have on their mental health? And how do you sort of guide a young child through this journey?
So to answer to that question would be that, when you talk about, so yes, kids these days are getting exposed to, we all know it, a lot of sexual content at a very early age. Whether they understand it, they don't understand it. But what they do understand is whatever they're watching, they don't know it sexual, not sexual, even a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old. But let's say you're dancing on a song, any song you pick up, there would be objectification of men and women there. And there is also going to be a norm about how a relationship looks like, right? I mean, a lot of songs have lyrics like "Tu meri hai," that
Possessiveness
and that, you're my property kind of a thing. And that feels like that's how a relationship is supposed to be, which we know is not healthy, right? So while there is a lot of exposure to sex, there is also a lot of exposure to how things look like, and they are being normalized. Because when nobody talks about it and everybody is doing it, it's getting normalized. Now, when you say, how do you talk about it and how do you take care of it? I think as parents, it's important, number one, cliched, but very important that there is communication, that you talk about it. But why does that fail? Because people say, we talk to our kids, but they don't want to listen. Because communication is not you speaking. The moment you are going to say, you know what, you can watch this, but you can't do this, their eyes are going to roll to the back and they've stopped listening, right? Communication is also listening to your child about what they observe and what's their viewpoint of it without you necessarily lecturing them on it. So again, getting back to what is going to be there, the impact on their mental health, let's say later. A lot of kids who are growing up with a lot of exposure to sexual content, which apparently seems to be normalized, we see later in lives, they're having difficulty regulating their sexual practices. Why? Because what you've seen in the beginning. So let's say, let's go a little bit forward and let's say a lot of young boys and girls might also expose themselves to some point in time to porn. And when that happens, or let's say whatever you're watching on the internet, which is readily available on OTT platforms also, you see that, you normalize it. Now, because as a teenager, as a 10 to 15-year-old, what is primarily happening in your brains right now is sexual hormones are developing. So that's exciting because whenever you're watching it, whatever is happening in your body, it's exciting. Right? So you'd want to do more of that. There is again that dopamine release is happening. You want to do that again. You want to do that again. You want to do that again. So when you are watching whatever you're watching, be it anything on the platforms or explicit stuff, your dopamine kick is happening. You are getting that and it's getting over. And like any other thing, your body just keeps getting used to it and it needs more of it. And because what they've seen growing up is this is normalized, for them to grow up in life and feel the need for more novelty seeking starts increasing. And that's what we also started to observe in adults today who probably have today, all those 20, 25-year-olds have reached this point because 10 years back, say they've started watching a lot of content and things like that, that in the way they're dating people and the way they're getting into relationships are that wherein relationships are not relationships in terms of how probably we as millennials looked at it, but they're more about sex. So as conversations between parents, few things that needs to happen is what is normalized might not be healthy. So because when you want to have a conversation about your child, when the world is doing it, when everybody is hooking up, then who are you to tell me not to, right? But they need to know through your conversations and communications that whatever is normalized in our society today might not be healthy. And we as a family can expect better things. So you can have higher expectations. That's going to be great for your, if they're put in a realistic way, realistic higher expectations are good for your child's self-confidence and self-esteem and sense of self also. So number one is that. Number two, I think it's important that parents can talk more about intimacy versus sex. Because ultimately the need for the sex is basically also a form of emotional and physical intimacy. And I think we need to talk to them more about that than primarily sex, right? Because the idea behind that at that point in time is also for you to find that intimacy. So I think conversations around that could also help us, laying the foundation to that. Then how this sex at all times and how casual sex at all times is not helping you. It's actually at the end of the day, what is going on with casual sex is that it messes up your state of being and your mental health. Yes. So it's intimacy that needs to be talked about. Also sex, but intimacy first. So talking about it also establishes the foundation to a healthy relationship that your child can have with people, and not see being likable only how good I am and how good I can be, and then how can I look, and only that will make me more desirable. No, your ability to be intimate with people is going to make you more desirable. So that takes away the pressure from looking a certain way to being a certain way as a human being. And that's what parents can talk about. But for that, an additional job for parents to do is become more and more reflective and self-aware about these things for themselves first. And then obviously for your kids. So parenting is a hard job.
It is. And the other end of the spectrum, I mean, we talked about hookups and sex, but there's also something which I guess I would have been a part of, but it's the ever after brigade, the Cinderella story, the perfect ending. Your first crush is going to be there forever. Your first friend is going to be your best friend forever. And, you have those bracelets. This is also that age when you're exchanging, friendship day cards, and they mean so much. But when all of that comes crashing down, and it might not. I have met people who've dated since they were 14 and now they're married, having children. That also exists, but realistically, it might not also. That disappointment with something coming to an end, something precious, something intimate, even if it's just a really good friend of the same sex or the opposite sex, how can a parent or a teacher or anybody, any adult in their life, sort of give them that support? Because that also does lead to a lot of mental health issues.
So I think even to that, again, where does the first one is going to be the last one and there's nothing now left? Where is that coming from? That's also coming from an expectation that's been set that if this doesn't work, nothing else is going to work. So if your first love didn't respond to you, your crush didn't respond to you, you are devastated, you are gone, you're a loser. This comes from somewhere. So while your children can receive messages from wherever, as a parent, you are the one who's responsible to, again, whatever they've consumed, your work is to help them unlearn the things what they've consumed might not be great. And that can be a great opportunity. If they've learned something which was not something meant to be, that is a great opportunity for you to kind of let them know that, yes, this also happens, but then this is also possible, because we all know that if we want to do a study, how many people ended up being with their first love? How many people, when they talk about their first love, crush, feel that, that was such a mistake. What was I even thinking, right? So when you think about it, when you talk about it, when you let your child know about it, they get to know it realistically. Otherwise, what they're looking at, pehla nasha, pehla khuma, I'm sure they're not, the kids today are not seeing this.
No, they're not.
But they're seeing something else, absolutely. I get that, right? But that's what was for me, right? And then it felt like, if that's not coming true, then nothing is coming true for me. My life is going to be horrid. Right?
There's also a particular way in which you think heartbreak has to be represented. So I have a friend, her daughter got dumped and she asked for ice cream, and she said she wants to sit in her pajamas and eat ice cream because that's what she saw on TV. It didn't help. And she felt quite sick the next day. But that's also there. So tell me, we were talking about 10 to 15 right now, but just the last couple of years of schooling, that's when I feel that the academic part of it, or the what's next part of it, really comes crashing down on you.
Absolutely.
And with the current sort of issues happening around entrance examinations, number one, how do you think something like these large exams being cancelled, how do you think this would impact a young child? And number two, in general, how do you sort of help a child at this age get through this sort of academic pressure?
See, I'll again say this thing, that a lot of these things are at the systems level as well. So there are multiple layers to it. And I can address only very few layers here. But I somehow really feel that the way, because of the peer pressure I think the parents go through, I have heard, and I have heard this from my own, adolescents clients that I'm seeing, that they say that, my parents have said that din mein to I have to study for at least 12-15 hours. Only then something will happen, right? And I'm saying, unko kisne bola? So they say that that's what the coaching institute spoke to them about, right? So what I've also seen as a trend, again, representative, because of what I have seen in my personal practice, is that a lot of students in their last final 2 years are not attending schools and they're going to dummy schools because, yes, massively, there's a lot of pressure. You ultimately have to give your entrances, and 11, 12, it seems like CBSE doesn't really, for whatever be the reason. So what is also happening, that you've taken away the child from a school system which is not only talking about academics. It's also helping you be, a head boy or a head girl, and then there are competitions and other aspects which anything else cannot replace it. So then what you've actually essentially done is picked out the child, pulled out the child, and you've made the child actually just a student of that academic curriculum that you want your child to study. So you've anyhow cut out their life and major parts of their life, telling them this is it. And when this is it, and if you're not faring well there, it is devastating. So again, how to deal with that pressure? I think it's essential for parents also to know that those entrances exams, yes, important if that's the goal of your life, but that's not the only way to your goal, right? Essentially, even if you want to do whatever in your life, whatever career path you're choosing, at the end of the day, what is the purpose of your life? When that combines with your vocation and what you do in your life, which can help you make money, is going to be so much more fulfilling than only running behind an exam, which you might not have the aptitude for. Because if your child is struggling and they are studying that amount, they don't wish to. If you're passionate about something, I feel that you can do it for 10 hours. If you're really passionate about it, you will do it left, right, center. It doesn't come as a chore. So if a child who's passionate in maths can sit and do maybe maths for a good amount of time, and they also probably don't have to spend that amount of time, they can do it in relatively lesser amount of time. So I think it is very, very essential that parents, before putting into that pressure, there are people who are doing well. So even when these exams do get cancelled, the students who are actually passionate about the subject, the students who can actually do it, you'll see that they'll not get so worked up about it. It's the ones who were putting in everything because they knew they were not great at it and they were average in it and they had to put in so much effort. Imagine for them now 6 months again they have to study. They can't do it because they never loved it. So this is going to be more problematic if you only look at the mental health aspect of it, to the ones who've been pushed into this. Ki karna hi hai. I'm seeing a client, okay, she's currently in her medical college. And she's now telling me that now that I'm about to complete it, which is again her beginning of her medical career, because MBBS is not it, right?
Yeah.
She's like, I don't want to do it because the last 10 years, which means at the age of 12, she started preparing for NEET. So she's like, I'm done. And she also knows that she cannot be done right now because now is when she has to do the work for another 5-7 years. So imagine you've done that to a 12-year-old. And now when they're 22, they don't want to do it anymore. And now is when it is so important for them to have that love for their whatever they were studying. So I would like parents to just calm down, help your child grow as an individual holistically, and talk more about ये करके होगा क्या? How are you impacting the world?
Yeah.
How are you making a difference in one person's life? Even if your job means that you're sitting and making some data, putting it in the Excel, but the ultimate aspect of it could be some things is still going to be there, right? So when you think and talk in those terms, you also as a parent don't put so much pressure into your child. And then yes, there are academic demands. There are things, there are periods of your life wherein you have to put in that amount of hard work nobody has to shy away from. But getting forced and pressure into it can be avoided, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
I started the episode talking about exoplanets and dark matter.
Yeah.
If somebody had told me back in school that, pulleys and the rate of a train catching up with another train would somehow help me get into exploring space, I might have actually been a lot more interested. But that relevance of what I was doing also wasn't there.
Yeah.
So I do think that does have an impact.
Yeah.
I have one last question, and this is looking way, way ahead. But this is the last year for Generation Alpha, which is the generation after Generation Z. And next year, they're going to name a new generation of children. If we don't do something about mental health issues for young people, and if we continuously just take a generic approach to it, what do you sort of see the next generation growing up to be?
I think what I'm also seeing as a trend is that mental health issues are various, right? And there are going to be, let's say, to give you an example, someone goes through a loss. A very natural reaction to that loss would be sadness. And there could be times that sadness is prolonged and it could lead to a mental health disorder, a mood disorder. That's natural, right? There are things that are going to happen in your life. But when you are growing up in an era wherein a lot of things are out there, complicated, and nobody's talking about it. Remember we spoke about temperament? The temperament could be vulnerable. The environment is also not very helpful. And, your social conditions or the situations that come across also are not very, very helpful. So imagine that we are then not dealing with episodes of mental health disorders or issues. We are dealing with something that becomes a part of your personality. That we know today is something, even in psychiatry and mental health, that personality issues do not necessarily have a cure. You have a depression, you have a depressive episode, you take your pills, you take your therapy, that depressive episode comes to an end. It could recur later. But with personality disorders, you see that that's a more recurrent, that then becomes who you are. And that starts bringing in problems in a lot of your areas of your life, your personal relationships, your professional work, your own, work with yourselves, and the way you cope up with things. I was talking about oppositional defiant disorder. As a 3 to 5 year old, you start seeing the child as being too oppositional, doing things that I am not going to agree to you. Doesn't gets in check, becomes conduct disorder. Doesn't stays in check, becomes an antisocial personality disorder, to which there is no treatment. You can manage it. You won't treat it. And antisocial personality disorder, people don't come to therapy or mental health, this thing, because there is no insight about something's wrong with me. So when that's there, that people who go out for mental health treatment or for mental health issues for that matter, are people who have some insight or something's wrong with me. I'm washing my hands unnecessarily. Something's wrong with me. It's causing distress. I'm not able to complete my work because 4 hours in my office, I'm just washing my hands. So you realize कि problem हो रहा है, I have to go. Some people know that's not a problem. हाथ गंदे तो धोने हैं. 4 घंटे लगे तो क्या हो गया? So that lack of insight starts coming in, will become a part of your personality. And that is something that can be scary.
And concerning, yeah. So thankfully, there are ways to prevent it. Absolutely. And having conversations which are very specific and, which can actually give parents the tools to take steps at the right age. Absolutely. I think that's super important.
Parents and for schools also, right? So things like wherein, we talk about so much more important to talk about social emotional learning. See, that's the prevention that we start with. That's also something that I'm also doing with some schools. And it's great that you do that, right? And schools, not only the high-end schools, but also schools in and more so in societies and communities and socioeconomic environments wherein there is more vulnerability to violence, aggression. So you are more exposed there, and there it becomes all the more important for you to teach the child the social emotional skills to regulate, right? So that you become a better parent when you grow up.
Thank you so much for everything you've shared. Thank
you, Sonali.
My husband is a physicist by training, and he often says this to me that, Sonali, collect all your data and then make a conclusion. If your data is incorrect, then your answer or your solutions will obviously also be incorrect. In the same way, if a young person in your life or your own child is going through insomnia, don't just assume it's because of social media addiction or a phone addiction or a screen addiction because the paper says so. Try to find out exactly what is going wrong, because it could be because of a bad breakup. It could be biological depression. It could be because of the big bag of chips they're having at midnight. It could be because of the video games. It could be anxiety over exams. It could be anxiety over not being invited to the next party. Whatever it is, your solution needs to be based around what's happening and not what you think is happening. I feel that there is a lot to be gained simply by giving young people a safe, non-judgmental space to speak in. The things they say might be completely different from what we're used to. But then let's be honest, are we really so perfect that we expect the next generation to be carbon copies of who we are? Because if generations didn't change and generations didn't evolve, we'd still be thinking that the world is flat and that volcanoes are a god having indigestion. What was your schooling journey like? And would you like to hear more about young people's mental health, possibly looking at factors such as parents and family dynamics and anger issues in more detail? Do let us know what you'd like to hear more about on this podcast. You can write to us at pods@indiatoday.com, or you can message us on 8588 966 996. We are also available on X, Facebook, WhatsApp channels, and Instagram.